Have you ever noticed how political debates these days feel less like a disagreement over policy and more like a high-stakes battle between good and evil? We're going to dig into the psychology behind why that is and what it tells us about bridging these divides that feel, well, almost impossible.
So why do these conversations get so incredibly heated? It turns out the answer isn't just about taxes or healthcare. It's about something much, much deeper, something that feels absolute and totally non-negotiable: our fundamental moral convictions. And when politics turns into a moral crusade, compromise starts to feel like a betrayal.
So, in this explainer, here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with where our political differences even come from. Then we'll look at the strange paradox of moral motivation. After that, we'll dive into the psychology of how we get isolated, and finally, we'll explore some real, concrete ways to break the gridlock.
Okay, to really get to the heart of this whole thing, we have to understand that liberals and conservatives often aren't just reading from a different page. It's more like they're speaking fundamentally different moral languages.
A really powerful way to understand this is something called moral foundations theory. And the best way to think about it is like this. Imagine our morals are a set of taste buds. We're all born with the ability to taste sweet, sour, bitter, you know the drill. But our culture and experiences train us to like some flavors more than others. Well, this theory suggests our morality works in a very similar way.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. Look at this pattern. Both liberals and conservatives put a super high value on care and fairness, but they split big time on the bottom three: loyalty, authority, and purity. For conservatives, these binding foundations, the ones that emphasize group cohesion, are almost as important as the first two. For liberals, they're just a much lower priority.
To see just how much these foundations are worth, a pretty fascinating study actually put a price on them. When they asked conservatives how much money it would take for them to blaspheme their parents, which is a violation of that authority foundation, the price, on average, was $10,000.
And liberals, their price was around $600. Now, the point isn't that one group is better or worse. It's just a really stark demonstration of how differently our moral intuitions are weighted. And that totally shapes what we see as sacred versus what's up for negotiation.
So we see these deep moral differences, right? Well, this leads to a central paradox. Our moral compass, the very thing that guides us, is a total double-edged sword. It can be a force for incredible good, but it can also be a huge barrier to progress.
And this is the real kicker. The exact same moral passion that gets us to vote, to protest injustice, and to donate to causes we believe in is also what makes us see our opponents as enemies. It fuels hostility. It prevents compromise. Basically, moral conviction drives almost every kind of political action except for talking to the other side.
But why does this happen? I mean, what are the deep psychological forces that pull us into our own little ideological tribes and actively push our opponents away? This is how we end up in those echo chambers we hear so much about.
Well, first, there are these powerful pull factors. We all have this fundamental human need to feel like we understand the world, right? So we seek out news and friends that tell us we're right. We have a need to belong, which can literally lead us to move to neighborhoods where people think and vote just like us. And honestly, we have a need for emotional comfort. Arguing with someone who rejects your core values is stressful. It's frustrating. So we just avoid it.
And at the very same time, there are these active push factors. We start to see our opponent's policies not just as wrong, but as morally offensive. We build up these negative stereotypes of them, that they're all selfish or hypocritical. Our own political views become sacred values, so when an opponent even questions them, it feels like a personal attack. And then we do this thing called motivated cognition, where we're not actually using morals to form our beliefs, we're just grabbing moral arguments to justify the side we already picked.
Now I know, that whole picture might seem pretty bleak, but here's the good news. The same psychological research that explains the problem also offers some very concrete, evidence-based strategies for how we can start building bridges instead of walls.
And the first, most crucial point is this. The divide in our heads is often way bigger than the one in reality. Study after study shows that we massively overestimate how extreme our opponents are and how much they dislike us. Just getting that misperception corrected is a huge first step.
Okay, so what can we actually do about it? Well, research points to a clear three-step process. First, you have to actively work to correct your own perceptions. Remember, the loudest voices you see on TV and social media, they don't represent the average person. Second, seek out constructive contact. This means repeated, cooperative interactions, maybe working on a community project together that has nothing to do with politics.
And third, when you do talk, listen to understand, not just to reload for your next argument.
And here are some specific techniques that have been shown to work. Instead of leading with a bunch of statistics, share a personal experience. Stories build empathy and are a lot harder to argue with. Also, explicitly show respect for the person, even while you're disagreeing with their idea. It just lowers their defenses. And try this. Frame your argument using their moral language. For example, you could argue for environmental protection by appealing to that conservative value of purity, the idea of keeping nature clean and pristine.
So in the end, the path forward isn't easy. It requires us to challenge some of our most basic psychological instincts, the comfort we feel in our tribe, the certainty that we are right. But it really leaves us with a fundamental question. In a world this divided, what do we value more, the satisfaction of being right or the possibility of understanding?